Nephilim, I'll give you a short and a long answer. The short one is the more honest one, which is, I don't know. I don't know. And that's probably the true answer for everybody. I can give you my best educated guesses, and I will, but really, this is one of those ones where we're doing our best to figure out what's going on, but we don't fully understand this text. But let me read it to you first, because context helps, as you said. So this is Genesis 6. Just the beginning. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh, his days shall be 120 years. And the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. And afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them, these were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Okay, so Nephilim in Hebrew, best interpretations say either it means the fallen ones or it means giants. And elsewhere in the Old Testament, they are referred to as tall. So that's probably a good translation there for you. In terms of understanding who they are, it seems like we need to go back and understand who these sons of God are, because it sounds like they are the products of the sons of God with the daughters of men. There are kind of three leading reasonings here for who they might be. One is that the sons of God were rulers at that time, that they were kings. Sometimes that expression is used of a king in the Old Testament. And that what's going on is that these men have basically begun to abuse their power, particularly in terms of marriage and sexuality, particularly in regards to polygamous marriage. And so a judgment is coming on them. Secondly, people will say, no, the sons of God are actually, they're fallen angels. That interpretation primarily comes out of the book of Enoch, which was a Jewish text written in the 1st century BC, and talks about that idea. That's a popular one. Everyone loves to run with that interpretation. I think it's a bit of an outlier, because I just think when you see the rest of the way that angels are kind of spoken about in the Old Testament, I think it doesn't really cohere. I also think of Jesus' words when he says, in heaven, you'll be like the angels who aren't married or given in marriage. So I don't know. I have some questions about that interpretation. So I think the one that, if we're applying the idea of what has come before, what is the context of the passage, I think most likely is probably the reading which says, no, the sons of God are carrying on with the line of Seth. And so what you have in Genesis 4 and 5 is you have genealogies coming down from Adam, and there are two lines that you see. On the one hand, you have the descendants of Cain. And in particular, what's highlighted there is that, like Cain, they've kind of gone astray. They're turning from God. That's particularly emphasized with number 7 in the line, who's Lamech, and he is both a murderer and a boaster, but also he's a bigamist. And so you kind of see everything going wrong down that line. Now, he's contrasted with the line of Seth. The 7th person in that line is Enoch, who we're told walked with God and was faithful. And then God took him away. And so he wasn't there anymore. And so you have these kind of contrasting genealogies being laid out, emphasizing Seth's line as the ones who call on the name of the Lord, the ones who are holy. And you're carrying on in that genealogy when you get to Noah. And so what scholars will say is actually we're still in that lineage when we're getting to this text. And so the sons of God are actually, it's a way of referring to these holy men, the ones who faithfully followed God. But what happens in Genesis 6 is you see them start to mix with the daughters of Cain. And so you see what was a holy, faithful group of people actually becoming corrupt in their beliefs and their practices. And you kind of see just how significant this fall is, because the language actually directly parallels what you're going to find in Genesis 3. So when Eve takes the fruit, we're told that she sees that it is desirable, and so she takes it. And then those same 3 words are used again in the Hebrew when it comes to Genesis 6. We're told that sons of God see that the daughters of man are desirable, and so they take them. And so you kind of see how sin is expanding. It's moving from the kind of like illicit consumption of fruit to the illicit consumption of people. It moves from desiring objects to objectifying people. And particularly, I think what you're seeing is polygamy taking shape as well. You've kind of moved from this one flesh, monogamous, I'm going to leave my mother and father and cleave to my wife in Genesis 2, that suddenly becomes these men who are taking from all that they chose in Genesis 6. So I think that's what's happening here. You're seeing the lines becoming corrupt. And at the end of the day, I think maybe it doesn't matter so much if we're not 100% sure exactly who these people are. Sometimes we're not going to know. We don't have all of the historical context. to work with today. But I think we know enough. I think we know enough in this text to understand what is the purpose of it. And the purpose is of getting to the point of explaining why does the flood happen. And actually, this tells us something really important about God's character. Because unlike some other ancient Near Eastern myths around a flood narrative, where you basically have the gods saying, oh, human beings are annoying me because they're too noisy and I can't sleep, so I'm just going to wipe them out. What you have in the Bible is this very clear statement about sin and about justice, and things reaching a point when actually it became so severe, so serious among human beings that actually for the sake of doing what was right, God had to act. So this tells us something really important about who God is right at the beginning of the Bible, that actually he is a God of justice and righteousness, and yet at the same time, when there's one righteous person, one righteous household, he will save Noah and he will redeem. And I think that is this tremendous image right at the beginning that ultimately takes us all the way to the New Testament. Right at the beginning, we see the justice of God and the mercy of God intersecting in this powerful way in Genesis that runs all the way through the Old Testament and ultimately is going to take us to the cross.